Hey everybody, welcome back to Finding Korea. I'm Katie, and if you're new here, this series is a way of exploring Korean culture, history, and identity as a Korean adoptee, diving back into my heritage and preparing to return to Korea. Last week, we talked to Corey Lemke about whether or not there is any language retention in adoptees' brains and dove into language and identity. Today, we're talking more specifically about the Korean language and how it ties into culture. Hyunwoo Sun is the founder of Talk to Me in Korean, one of the most widely used Korean language learning platforms in the world. There are 48 books, multiple apps, a YouTube channel, and a program that has been running for over 17 years. He grew up in Gwangju, taught himself English, and then turned that whole experience into a resource for anyone trying to do the same with Korean. We're not going to be talking grammar rules or syntax. Even if you're not interested in languages or learning Korean, you're going to love this conversation because it really gives an insight into the culture. I believe that if you want to understand people better, you learn how they speak. It gives you a connection and an insight like nothing else can. Make sure to stick around to the end because I have an exciting update about my own progress in learning Korean. So let's get into it. Hey, Hyunwoo, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Can you introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what you do?
My name is Hyunwoo. I'm from South Korea. I teach the Korean language. I've been doing this for the past 17 years through a brand called Talk to Me in Korean. And not only the Korean language, but Korean culture as well. I try to introduce a lot about Korean culture and how you can speak the language, the Korean language, to have wider ranges of experience in Korea or wherever you are. So yeah, very nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. I'm really excited. I think like you bring up a really good point that it's really important to like speaking a language is one thing, but like it's kind of pointless if you don't have the context and the cultural background to go with it. And so I think those two things go hand in hand and pair like perfectly together. So I love that.
Mhm.
What kind of got you into Korean? Like where does your passion for the Korean language come from and teaching the Korean language?
So I grew up in a smaller, relatively small city called Gwangju. So smaller compared to Seoul, but still quite big. And growing up, I noticed that I was speaking a dialect that is different from the Seoul
Oh.
accent, different from the kind of accent that people were speaking on TV. So my general interests in languages overall started when I was a little boy. And then when I moved to Seoul to attend college, I started speaking more English. I had to learn it on my own. And learning English here in Korea without living overseas or in an English speaking country was not easy, but
Yeah.
I eventually managed. And when it was about time to graduate from college, I had learned some French, some Japanese as well. And I had also learned a thing or two about how to build websites and make videos and various multimedia related, I guess, skills. So I put all of my hobbies and interests and passions into one area, one kind of activity, and turned my foreign language knowledge into teaching my mother tongue using English. So that's Talk to Me in Korean. I'm very fortunate to have been doing it as my first full-time job ever since.
Wow, that's amazing. And also, learning a language on your own is so impressive. Well, it sounds like learning a bunch of languages on your own, but in
Mhm.
general, like on your own is so impressive. I definitely need like structure to be able to learn a language. Would you say that English is taught a lot in schools in Korea or not as much?
It is taught a lot in Korea. It was already taught quite heavily in schools in Korea when I was a middle school boy or high school student. But the purpose of English education was very different from actually speaking it. I think it still
Mm,
is different. So it's a school subject, just like math or science. You have to memorize a bunch of things and hope to pass exams with good enough scores so that you won't get in trouble or you will be able to go to a good college. So, yeah, still, English as a whole is not treated like a real live language, it's treated like a school subject.
Yeah, I think that's the problem with languages. I mean, I guess I don't want to speak for everybody everywhere, but I've heard that a lot. Certainly, that's was my experience in school, where it's just kind of like, okay, like here are the grammar rules and the grammar tables, like memorize these and like go on your way. And there's just
Yeah.
no connection, no anything like that. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And are there a lot of different dialects in Korean? I guess I never even like considered that.
There are mainly four or five major dialects in Korea and also small, I guess, variations among those four or five. But apart from the dialect that they speak on Jeju Island, everything is pretty much like, possible to guess just based on the Seoul dialect that everybody learns. So you won't be in too much trouble just by learning the standard Korean speech.
Oh, okay. Phew.
Yeah. Yeah.
And okay, this is going to be a very broad question. Can
Mhm.
you give a little overview about the Korean language? Again, I know that's like difficult to put into a few sentences or whatever, but like, what is it like?
Mm.
And kind of what are some of the big differences between Korean and English?
Okay, so that's the first time I've actually gotten this kind of question. What is the Korean language like? Maybe I should think more about it. But what is it like? If you are familiar with Chinese or Japanese, you can draw similarities and differences compared to those two languages, but Korean is kind of in between those two languages. We do use lots of the nouns and verbs based on those nouns drawn from Chinese characters, but we also have our unique writing system invented by a person, King Sejong, based on scientific rules and methods. So as a whole, the Korean language is very different from English, as you know. Mainly the word order, the syntax structure is very different, but the writing system being really scientific and easy to learn makes it easier. And what is it like? It's very heavily based on the relationship that you have with the other person. It's super high context. So the same word can mean various other things in different situations, and
Oh no.
lots of sentences will change the ending form based on who you're speaking to. So it is relatively easy to start a Korean sentence and then you go with 100% confidence. But then toward the end of the sentence, you're like, I'm not sure anymore how to finish this sentence
Oh
because the
no.
relationship dictates how you will form the ending.
Of the verb
It
or of the noun?
of
Or of
of the verb, yeah, of the verb and the verb conjugation. But I believe all the languages that we speak as human beings have evolved to be the most effective form, to be the most efficient form over time, thousands of years of, development. So Korean is not unnecessarily more difficult than any other language, I think. So it's doable, it's manageable. Anybody who can put enough hours into it can learn it, and it'll be a lot of fun.
yeah, so I have heard that the writing system is notoriously, I don't know if easy is the right word, but it's simple and it was made to make it so that the literacy rates were higher. And
Yeah.
so that is promising because I know I think in certainly Mandarin and Japanese, I don't know Cantonese too, if it's
Yeah.
pretty difficult to write.
It takes many years for anyone to be able to fluently read and write, including native speakers. And King Sejong was the name of the person who invented the writing system. He invented it so that, so to speak, the writing system or the written form of the language could be democratized, used by everybody. Because we were like, until 600-ish years ago, people in Korea were speaking one form and writing another form. So we were borrowing the Chinese characters and we were just writing. But the way we were writing stuff wasn't easily recognizable by even Chinese people. So we were using our own system, just borrowing the Chinese characters. And then there was a way that people could use to decipher. It was like code language, only for people who could afford to spend years studying the writing system, who didn't have to work as much. So the king wanted to change that, and he was a genius who was good to the people.
Yeah, wow, that is really, really interesting. And also just like I think really smart as well. Um, so I'd seen like a ranking system, and this is for native English speakers, and the difficulties, there's like 5 levels of difficulties in learning a language. And so level one is like Spanish, like the Romance languages, Spanish, Italian, French, Portuguese, Romanian, and then just kind of gets more difficult from there. And then in level five, like out of the, which is the hardest of all of them, it was just Mandarin, Cantonese, Japanese, Arabic, and Korean. And I was like, oh,
Yeah,
great.
right. But it's
So
actually not, yeah, not the Korean language itself that is inherently more difficult. It's just how different it is from English. So the same goes to Koreans learning English. So English will be on the other end of the spectrum, right?
okay, yeah, I
So
guess that actually
yeah.
makes sense and is a little more comforting. So, like, yeah, so what do you think? So it's the differences that make it so difficult. And you were saying, is it mostly just those verb endings? Is there other things as well that make it particularly difficult for English learners?
I think so. Basically, saying, just briefly going over the characteristics of the Korean language. Once again, I mean, the grammar rules and vocabulary, everything that you need to learn Korean. I guess the amount is similar to what I had to do to learn English. I guess any Korean person has to do to learn English, but just a little on top of that, Korean being very relationship based and super high context makes it just a tad bit more difficult and challenging than English. So, yeah, you can't say the same. I mean, in English, you can hear a pop song or song lyric that you like. You can say the same line. You might risk sounding too poetic, maybe, but then you're mostly fine. But in Korean, based on who you're talking to, you can sound rude, you can sound polite, you can sound stupid. All of those things are possible. So it's super relationship based and high context.
How many different conjugations are there based on the different kinds of relationships?
There are mainly 4 different levels of politeness. So that's relatively easy to figure out. But just the main challenge when it comes to actually speaking to people is, a lot of the subjects will be omitted. So
Oh,
one of the hardest things in Korean to navigate is how to say you. Like the word you can be very challenging because people just normally skip it and it is understood, right? In English, it is
uh-huh.
so easy to say you, or in Spanish or in French, you just have to figure out whether to use tu or usted or vous or tu. But then in Korean, there can be hundreds of, boss, manager, teacher, so and so's mom, so and so's dad.
Uh-huh.
It's all relationship based. So
But
you can't have one single word to say you.
oh no. Okay. Okay, interesting. How do you think like the language has influenced the culture or the culture influences the language? I mean, I think probably, and what you were just talking about is an example in the sense that the relationship based and kind of the, I don't know if hierarchy is the right word, but kind of different levels of respect and the respect that you show to people is certainly different than we're pretty informal, I would say, in English. And so I imagine that reflects kind of the formality of the culture. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about that? And if there's any other examples about how kind of each has maybe influenced the other?
Well, the Korean language is also moving in the direction of becoming more casual, I think. The formality levels are becoming a little more blurry. The distinctions are becoming blurrier than before, but still, just because culture influencing the language and vice versa kind of go hand in hand together, you can't separate everything. And for example, so far, for the past few minutes that we have been talking, the amount of times that I would have said, like, clearly using any word in Korean, you, like I would have distinctly used you, would have been less than two times. And every other time would have been just omitting it and kind of implying that I'm talking about you using various subtle suffixes here and there. So, yeah, you just have to, I mean, the language itself is possible to learn, but then the practice part, you can't do it easily without practicing speaking to a real person because of all the intricate details of the relationship based systems, I guess.
Would you say that it's harder to come up with like the words you're gonna say and use it in that context? Or is it also really difficult to understand it when someone's speaking like to you, or maybe like they're speaking to a third party or something? Do you know what I mean? Like the understanding of the implications and stuff. Is that hard to
Well,
understand, or is that pretty obvious?
it's pretty obvious. I mean, if you just jump into the intermediate level or the advanced level conversation and look at everything translated into English, it would sound very daunting and intimidating. But because you will go from zero and build your skills upwards, it'll, you'll get used to everything at the same time as you're learning the language. So what I'm saying is, for example, do you want coffee? That kind of phrase, like, do you want coffee? It's a simple phrase, but if you're sitting next to a younger person and another person who's older than you, the same phrase in Korean will be two different kinds based on the age hierarchy. But is it really too tricky to figure out? Like, do you have to think a lot to translate that into two different versions? Not really, because up until that point, you've probably had various interactions with older people and younger people, and you have accumulated a lot of information. Oh, in this case, this form of politeness level comes out naturally, and just by looking in the eyes of the younger person, this more casual version of the sentence comes out naturally. So anybody can learn. It's fun. It's because I'm a teacher, I like to explain the complicated nature of the Korean language, but at the same time, I need to remind people it's all possible. If I could learn English on my own here in Korea, you can also learn to speak Korean much better than I speak English.
I don't know. You speak excellent English. Also, you like have no accent, which is very impressive.
Thank
Um,
you.
does that matter too much? Like, I don't think it's a particularly tonal language, but I was talking to somebody who was saying like technically it isn't tonal, but like people use tones to convey things. Would you agree with that, or kind of how does
Yeah.
that play into the language?
Korean is a low-key tonal language. So
Okay.
we don't have the accents that we use in like over certain words, just like Chinese uses in their pinyin, tones, or other languages too. We don't have those written within the language, but people, native speakers, do know when somebody says with the wrong intonation. So it's not officially tonal, but if you say something with the wrong intonation, a native speaker will have a hard time understanding you.
And then do you go over like the hierarchy? I mean, some things I suppose are obvious, like a young person and an older person, but like where, I don't know, like does the profession matter? Like a certain kind of profession is higher up than a different profession,
Mm.
or how do you go over that? Like, how do you go over the different examples and kind of teach people where they should be using the certain conjugations and versus the other ones?
Well, it doesn't really have anything to do with the profession of the other person. It's mostly
Okay.
about the age and what kind of attitude you want to have toward the other person. There are mainly four major levels, two being more formal and two being more casual. And it's fairly straightforward in my perspective, and even very practical, which it's a system that English lacks. So I mean, just because languages like the English language doesn't have these types of formality levels doesn't mean it's easier to navigate through the language because those politeness levels are lacking or absent in English as a non-native speaker. I have to figure out how to sound more formal, less formal, using my facial expressions and my gestures. In my personal opinion, that's even more work. Why should I do all of that when I could just use a different kind of structure verbally? I think that's less work in Korean.
Oh, that's fair enough. That's a really interesting way to look at it. I know somebody who English isn't their first language, but they work in English, and they're telling me they have a like Excel spreadsheet that had different formal expressions, and so when they were writing emails, they would just like copy and paste
Yeah,
like, to whom it may concern, or just like random phrases and stuff that you kind of only use for email and stuff like that. And it is
yeah,
really interesting to think about because we don't really use that when we are speaking to one another, but writing, I guess, is a little bit different. But
yeah.
that's a really interesting perspective to view formality in the way that it is expressed, whether it's physical or with words. And yeah, I never would have thought of that. That's really interesting. Um, Besides the formality, are there other concepts that don't really translate from English to Korean or vice versa, maybe from Korean into English?
Concepts. I mean, these days, automatic translations and AI translations are really good. So if you give AI any word, it'll translate pretty well. I guess rather than words or like concepts, I think certain expressions related to what people do in a certain culture and what people in another culture have never done. For example, two kinds of expressions that I see all the time in English language novels is somebody rolling their eyes and somebody pursing their lips. Those do not exist in Korean. So whenever, yeah, so I recently finished listening to an audiobook where the author kept saying, and then he pursed his lips, and then she pursed her lips, like over four or five times throughout the novel. And I'm like, I know what he's trying to say, but how would I translate or even explain that to a Korean person who doesn't speak any other language? Because rolling your eyes, it's, you're frustrated, you're upset, you're angry, maybe to your parents or spouse, or, it doesn't work like that. Nobody does that in Korea. And
Really?
yeah, I mean, you know what it means, but we don't have an expression. Rolling in Korean, if you say 누나를 굴리다, rolling your eyes, it actually only means you're cheating in an exam. You're like, you know,
No way.
why else would you roll your eyes? You're like, looking sideways. And then pursing your lips, you're like, you have something to say, but you're like,
Kind of
in
holding back a
Korean.
little bit and
Yeah, but it only means you're about to kiss somebody or because you're pursing your lips. Like why else would you purse your lips?
oh my God, that's so crazy. So people
So
just
it's
don't roll their eyes? Like how do they express like frustration or like I would say frustration in a like I would do that for like my brother or like maybe behind like someone's like obviously it's very rude but yeah I guess I would do it more when I feel much more comfortable to be like ugh like my brother
yeah,
just did this or like ugh my mom
it's
asked me to
just
clean my room.
yeah, it's just not something that people even think of doing, and it's just
Wow.
one kind of usage Koreans never even thought of making. Like one way I like to look at it is if you look at I mean, I have a lot of Indian friends, and the way they use their head to kind of tilt like in their own Indian way.
The infamous
It's an
headbutt.
Indian thing, and I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to move my head like that. It's kind of like that. In one culture, it's so common. In another
Mhm.
culture, we didn't even think of using the body part in that way. So naturally, the language never developed around it. So
Oh my God,
other
that's
than, yeah, words or verbs It's usually things related to what people do in that culture, action based.
Are there things in Korean that like you're speaking English and you're trying to convey or whatever, and you're just like, oh, there isn't a thing in like a word or a phrase in English for this?
Well, lots of adjectives and adverbs don't translate very clearly and I guess in a straightforward way. For example, 답답해. 답답해 is frustration, but also slow. Frustration based on somebody's slow response or a clear lack of understanding of the better way to do something. Lots of
Very
like,
specific.
yeah, very specific. And the person in front of you in a line is very slow in at using the kiosk. You're like 답답해, like you wish you could just do it for you, even pay for their coffee or something like that, and so that you can get your coffee quickly. Then why does it have that kind of strong meaning in Korea or in Korean culture? Because people have accumulated lots of experiences where things are done really quickly. So when in another language, you don't even have the desire for speed, in an Italian coffee shop or in an Italian French restaurant, you're like waiting forever for the waiter to notice you. That's not going to happen in Korea. You just get up. You don't even have to ask for the bill. You just drag your chairs out. You get up, walk out the door, and somebody will stop you so that you can pay within 3 seconds. You're out of the restaurant whenever you want, right? And when that is not allowed to you or offered to you, you feel like, oh, 답답해. Why do they even do it this way? So the whole cultural landscape has to be understood by the person to be even able to understand that one word. So there are lots of examples like that between Korean and English because the two languages are so different.
Wow, that is fascinating and also brilliant. Do you have any examples like of things like that when you were studying like French or Japanese? Or I mean, obviously similar concepts or whatever, but like things that you didn't find in English or you didn't find in French or Japanese or whatever that were, in Korean or vice
Um,
versa.
Lots of reflective verbs in French, like, you have to, so
Oh yeah, those kill
basically,
me.
yeah, I mean, in English too, you are washing your hands, or, but you say, je me lave les mains, like I wash myself the hands. And, and you wake up, but you wake yourself up, je me lève, things like that. The beginning stage is complaining. Why do they do that? Why can't they say just 70 instead of saying 70? Like, why do they say 60 and 10? How, how do they manage? Like, why is it 4 times 20 for 80, like 80? But that's the first stage, complaint. But then you get used to it, and before you realize you're already doing it, like very naturally. And then you find it amusing. And once you understand more, very enlightening too. So I think it was the writer Goethe, like the German writer, who said, if you don't know another foreign language, you don't know your mother tongue. So because you're looking at your mother tongue from a foreigner's perspective, just by learning the new language, you understand that maybe what you're doing in your own culture is not the right answer, you know? So
I
yeah, it's
love
fun.
that. Yeah, I love that, and that is so interesting. With Korean being such like a fast-growing language, and with people being really excited about K-dramas and K-pop, and it just kind of globally exploding. Do you feel like people come to the table with, I don't know, preconceived notions or assumptions about the culture, or that they're kind of missing anything by only you know seeing that and seeing Korea as just that?
I think it's a mixed bag of pros and cons. Before, maybe 20 years ago, when I first entered the scene, I started my company 17 years ago, but I started writing Korean language related blog posts and stuff over 20 years ago. And compared to back then, it's great that people look at the Korean language with pre-established, I guess, understandings of the culture too. They watch a lot of dramas and they watch a lot of movies, listen to many Korean celebrities talk about Korean culture, and they come into the game already knowing quite a lot about culture, right? Like, oh, I heard that it's rude to receive an object that somebody's handing to you with one hand. Oh, I heard that this is rude in Korea, this is polite in Korea. That's great. But having too much knowledge or too much more knowledge compared to the amount of knowledge that you have about the language can even sometimes hinder your progress, because you think you know too much, or you think there's too many things to consider before stepping outside the door and actually meeting people. So before 20 years ago, people didn't have a lot of, I guess, information about the Korean culture, history, things, the way to do things in Korea. So they were making lots of culture-related mistakes. That's good. That's natural. But now, yeah, people do know a lot more about the culture, but still, I think that can give people a lot of fear of sounding rude, maybe, sounding not polite enough. So my recommendation is to not worry about that. Just let all that information wash over you, and you can, you will remember the necessary things when you need to. Just, try to speak as much as possible, interact with as many people as possible.
And how are Koreans with speaking to people like foreigners speaking Korean? Like, are they, I going to Thailand, you say like one word and they're like, oh my God, you speak perfect Thai. And then, also on the totally other end of the spectrum, you've got the stereotypical French who you can say, you can be speaking fluently and they're like, no, kind of thing. I know that's just like a stereotype. But anyway, where would you say Koreans kind of fall in when they're speaking Korean to a foreigner?
What you described just now was the case for most Korean people. There were people who would, react very positively to even one simple 안녕하세요 greeting. But then on the other end of the spectrum, there were people who were very upset that you didn't speak it well enough. But now I think thanks to a lot of media exposure and lots of foreigners living in Korea, working in Korea, who are also on TV and on YouTube channels speaking varying degrees of Korean and still doing what they're good at. Like there are people who there's YouTubers in Korea who don't speak Korean perfectly well, but then they still have lots of followers because they are genuinely interesting as a person, right? So it's a very healthy situation, I think. So people have more realistic expectations of what kind of level of Korean they will hear from people. So younger people, especially who consume a lot of media where non-native speakers are talking in Korean, they will have a very flexible attitude. So they will see, like, they won't react right away. They will like kind of wait to get more information about your Korean skills. So they will go say 안녕하세요, okay, and then they will wait for the next line, and maybe 4 or 5 phrases after, they'll have a fair evaluation of your current Korean level, and then they will adjust the conversation difficulty level.
So yeah, that's great to know. I don't speak really any Korean. I can say like literally 2 words. But I am about to start, and I'm excited, but a little bit nervous as well.
You don't have to be.
I am excited. It's also just daunting starting a whole new language just in general.
Of course, of course.
Do you have any advice for somebody who's just starting out? I'm coming in with like 0.
The only advice that I always give to people who are like really starting out from scratch is to have, really realistic expectations of how hard learning a completely new language is, just in general, in principle. So don't think that you are going to be able to master it within 1 year, and, don't be disappointed just because you haven't. You're going to have to pour hours and hours into it, and even more. So it's going to take a long time for you to have a comfortable level of conversation with anybody. So yeah, just spend a lot of time. That's the only thing I can say.
And it is so true. It's language learning is such a humbling thing, especially as an adult. Like, I maybe I shouldn't speak for all adults, but
Mm.
we're just so used to not being like so bad at things. And when you start a new
Mhm.
language, you just have to be bad.
Yeah.
And not even bad. Like it's not because you're bad at it. It's just because you don't know, and like you don't know what you don't know, and so you just have to like practice and make a lot of mistakes. And it is an extremely humbling experience
Yeah.
and a confusing experience, but also like there's something so joyous about like the little wins, and you're like, oh my God, I just like ordered something at a restaurant, or I just like said something to my cab driver, or whatever. You get little wins as well, like a lot, which is also very exciting. And the exhaustion that I feel at the end of the day because my brain has been working so hard is a really like good feeling. Like it's a nice feeling to be so tired because my brain is like working so hard. So it's like nice to put my brain to work, I guess.
Yeah, it's a very nice exercise for your brain, for your mental capacity as well, because learning a new language is one of the hardest things that you can do as an adult. Everybody in the world has learned at least one mother tongue, and that happened naturally because of our survival instincts, and we had to learn at least one language. But learning something new is very necessary, especially more necessary in this era of AI, because everybody's outsourcing their thinking to AI, and they have this false sense of accomplishment because they think they understood something just because ChatGPT or Gemini wrote something for them in front of their eyes, but their eyes just skimmed over the lines. They didn't really understand it. They think they did, but language learning will require you to really understand something and then produce information based on it. So it is going to be super, super beneficial.
So true. So true. I can already feel my brain go to mush for something, especially like even since something is like directions. Like if someone tells me directions, I'm like, I'm not listening. I'm just going to use like Google Maps.
Yeah.
And I've just like lost the ability to pay attention when someone gives me directions. But I was
Mm.
doing that one time in like a hospital, and I was like, oh no, I can't Google Maps like inside the building, so I better pay
Hmm.
attention. Like I can already feel my brain going to mush. So that's an excellent point.
Mm.
Well, thank you so much for chatting. This has been so interesting, and I'm like really, really excited. Can you share with people like how to find you and your programs, how to like start Korean with you, and all the good stuff?
So our channel is called Talk to Me in Korean. We're all over the place. If you just type Talk to Me in Korean, you'll find all of our tools and resources. We have 48 books published and 3 apps, mobile apps that you can use. Our courses are also very friendly. So yeah, please type Talk to Me in Korean wherever you search for information, and you will find us. And if you want to get started with one thing, come to our YouTube channel, and you will enjoy lots of videos that we post there.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. 감사합니다.
감사합니다.
And yeah, this has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Okay, my mind was blown talking about some of those things. I love learning about phrases that don't translate or cultural habits that simply don't exist in other places. I just think that's like so fascinating. But I think my favorite thing about that whole interview was that I realized I inadvertently kind of kept trying to talk about how difficult Korean is or how daunting the whole process is going to be. And Hyunwoo like wasn't having any of it. He was so patient and positive and refused to call Korean difficult or give in to my doubts and fears. And that is the mark of an exceptional teacher. And also just like so important to keep in mind. If you keep telling yourself that it's going to be hard, it's going to be. Attitude is maybe the most important thing when it comes to doing anything. And so I really, really appreciated that. We recorded this conversation at the end of May, and I've since started using Talk to Me in Korean to learn. I'll be posting my update next week so you can see how it's going and if I'm still as optimistic. If you want to start learning Korean, go find Hyunwoo and his team at Talk to Me in Korean. They're everywhere, so you can't miss them. I'll link everything in the description below. And if you're on this journey with me, trying to connect or reconnect to Korea or your roots in general, learning the language, figuring out what it all means, I would love to know. Leave a comment, reach out. I really do read them all. Ooh, forgive me. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.